Welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this unique event we are hosting during these unusual times. My name is Vaneta Limberova. I'm a chair of Youth LGBT organization Действие, Bulgaria, the co-organizer of the event, together with the Soldier Unit of Council of Europe. Frankly speaking, it would have felt much better to be able to really see everyone here in Sofia during this new normal we are all living, and I'm happy we are all safe and healthy at our homes. With regret, I should say in the beginning that the online format of the event, with all technical and time-wise limitations it brings, will prevent us of having any interactions between the participant and the audience or Q&A session. However, we do hope to be able to have next year an in-person event in Sofia without such kind of limitations. I will switch now in Bulgarian. Добър ден и здравейте на всички, на български, в събитието и на тези от вас, които ни гледат на живо през лайвстрим.
Welcome to all of you watching us through live stream or on social networks. My name is Vaneta Limberova and I'm the chair of the LGBT Действие Youth Organization. I will moderate this event. I hope all of you can hear and see me well. Thank you for your participation in this very important webinar, which brings together for the first time all interested parties in human rights protection, policing of hate crimes against LGBT people in Bulgaria. We have representatives of the Council of Europe, the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Police Academy, human rights activists, lawyers, and trainers. I would like to congratulate all of you on your work so far and your efforts on human rights protection, especially regarding the rights of LGBT people in Bulgaria. LGBT rights, as we all know, are human rights, and as the UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres said last year, until people encounter prejudice and violence and repressions because of their sexual orientation, we need to counter these acts. We will soon celebrate 72 years since the Convention on Human Rights Protection, and for me it is an honor to open this event and give the floor to Milena Ivanova, who is the director of who is the head of the Human Rights Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Надявам се чуваме. Казах добро утро на всички.
I hope you can hear me. Good morning to everyone. I'm the head of the Human Rights Department. I have my colleague Christina here with me, who is working on this file. For the two of us today, it is a pleasure to be part of this event today on the protection and fostering of human rights, focusing especially on hate crimes against LGBT people in Bulgaria. We're sure there's hardly a more appropriate moment than today, which is the International Day of Human Rights, and I hope each of us will be useful in today's event and will be able to contribute to tackling the issues that we're facing. For us, being part of this discussion is an opportunity to remind ourselves that the protection of human rights is not a one-off act at a given moment, but is rather an ongoing effort and policies and actions which would allow for problems to be solved in the best way.
И разбирането си, че всеки един от нас
we share the understanding that each of us should have the opportunity to make use of their rights. So nobody, including LGBT people, are discriminated against or become victims of hate crimes. We know that discrimination and hate speech are usually motivated by negative perceptions or prejudice. And the competent Bulgarian authorities should react against those in a timely manner and undertake the necessary actions in line with the legislation. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 lockdown has contributed to, has added additional stress to the lives of each of us. And that includes LGBT people in Bulgaria. So we are of the opinion that although each country deals with the pandemic in its own way, with its own means, there must be a common effort, and that would be much more useful for dealing with the problems we're facing. We need to share responsibilities. We also realize that countries have a commitment to protecting human rights under the International UN Convention and the various Council of Europe instruments, and we need to fulfill those obligations. And this holds true of Bulgaria too. So we are of the opinion that when we contribute, as is the case of the translation of this manual on dealing with hate crimes against LGBT people, we should keep in mind not only improving legislation, but also applying the current legislation in the best possible way. I don't know if I'm making myself clear enough, but what I mean is not only constantly try to amend legislation, but also make the best use of the legislation we do have in order to tackle this negative phenomenon. I would like to thank the Council of Europe for their cooperation, and especially their anti-discrimination and SOGI unit. We're convinced that their expertise and constant efforts have contributed to Bulgarian authorities being able to make a step forward in the fight against hate crimes against LGBT people in Bulgaria. We hope that this manual, now that it's translated into Bulgarian, will be very useful to our colleagues at the Ministry of Interior. And we would also like to thank the colleagues at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the contact person at the Human Rights Department there, who was very active on the issue, and we hope that in the future the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will continue to support various campaigns, public campaigns aimed at changing these negative trends and phenomena in our society. The issues we're discussing today are certainly a focal point in the agenda of all international organizations dealing with human rights. The Council on Human Rights at the UN, the Council of Europe, the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance. Unfortunately, because of the COVID pandemic, we have not been able to follow through with our interactive dialogue and meetings within the framework of our 6th cycle. But we're hoping this will happen next year. We are open to any form of interaction on dealing with hate crime, and we hope that we'll periodically exchange information with the colleagues at the Ministry of Interior regarding their experience with applying this manual. I'm expecting there will be challenges and best practices that they will want to share. And finally, if I may, I think it might be interesting to all of us to hear what the agenda is of the Council of Europe, their anti-discrimination department, and of course the NGOs for next year. Thank you. Thank you, Milena, for this talk, especially the part where you mentioned your dedication and resolve of the Bulgarian government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to work with all interested parties and especially your understanding of the necessity and your willingness to join campaigns against prejudice against LGBT people. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of the Council of Europe, Irena Gidikova, who is head of the Inclusion and Anti-Discrimination Program Division. Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this meeting, albeit virtual. It would be much nicer if it were live in Bulgaria. For me, this is a premiere. It's first for us as a department organizing such an event in Bulgaria, and I think it's important to note. For me, for my 25 years in the Council of Europe, it's also a first working on this topic in Bulgaria, so I'm truly very happy. Before I discuss the topic of today's event, because there was a question what the agenda of the Council of Europe is, and what we're planning in terms of events and instruments. Some of you maybe know that this year a new intergovernmental committee started work, which is called the Anti-Discrimination, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And this committee, for the first time in the history of the Council of Europe, has, as part of its mandate, work on the rights of sexual minorities. I'm not sure that's the correct term. It was not easy because not all members of the European Council have the same attitude on this priority, but the committee did begin work in June, and it will cooperate very closely with an informal group you probably are familiar with, the European Network of LGBT Focal Points, and the commitment by various European governments on LGBT rights. It's a group of about 37 referents. I think Bulgaria is part of it, perhaps not a permanent member. And if we're not a permanent member, I would invite the Bulgarian authorities to appoint someone as a permanent representative so they can be part of all the meetings that take place in this committee. Now, on the topic, if you allow me, I'll speak in English.
After the entry into force of the international human rights treaties that were already mentioned, we still unfortunately have a long way to go with the effective enjoyment of human rights, especially the rights of LGBTI persons. And especially this year, we have witnessed growing violence in everyday life towards these persons. This year has been dubbed a year of epidemic of violence. And especially LGBTI persons who have other intersecting identities, such as Roma persons or LGBTI persons with disabilities, asylum seekers, etc., have been most seriously affected by discrimination and hate. So the intersectional approach to discrimination and hate is something that is moving up on our agenda. It's not something that is easy to work with because usually anti-discrimination legislation and litigation find it difficult to deal with multiple discrimination, but it's something that we really need to look into seriously, and also in the context of dealing with hate crimes. As you may be aware, the Council of Europe has adopted the first international legal instrument on measures to combat discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation or gender identity. This was 10 years ago. So this year we are celebrating the 10th year anniversary of this Committee of Ministers recommendation. And we also reviewed the implementation by member states of the requirements of this recommendation. And what we realized is that there is progress. 27 of the 47 member states of the Council of Europe have included the ground of sexual orientation in their legislation, and 15 have done so with regard to gender identity, which is, still not the majority, but there is progress. However, effective implementation of existing legislation remains a challenge, and here I relate very strongly to the previous speaker. Legislation is by far not enough. You need to put in place effective mechanisms for implementation, capacity building, and incentives for all the law enforcement and justice professionals and institutions to do their part. Hate crimes and also hate speech against LGBTI persons continue to be underreported and underinvestigated. In Bulgaria, according to this review, Prosecution of hate crimes on grounds of sexual orientation or gender identity has been identified as an area for future improvement. There is lack of awareness of procedural aspects and lack of trust in law enforcement, which leads to underreporting of hate crimes. This is something very common, of course, in all societies. In Bulgaria, it has been specifically underlined. And Bulgarian authorities should also ensure the safety and dignity of LGBTI persons deprived of liberty. The review acknowledged that efforts have been made to streamline the collection of hate crime data, and that in some cases data systems have been improved to include SOGI as motivations for hate crime, which is positive. Now, the lack of data on SOGI as hate crimes is widespread among EU member states, as the recent survey of the Fundamental Rights Agency showed. For instance, 1 in 3 LGBTI persons always avoid certain places for fear of being assaulted or harassed. And particularly common is this among trans and intersex persons. In only 1 in 10 incidents of harassment were reported, and just 4% were reported to the police. So throughout the EU area, there is significant, I would say, overwhelming underreporting of LGBTI hate crime. And even more concerningly, 1 in 3 trans persons did not report the incidents for fear of transphobic reactions from the police. Now, police have been in the spotlight a lot this year for racism, and measures have been started to be taken in many countries. I would like to hope that similar developments will happen in relation to sexism and transphobia in police. Now, when referring to data and reporting mechanisms, it's important that member states adopt measures to ensure that those who are targeted are not deterred by fears about consequences that might follow from complaints or providing evidence. For instance, there should be a specific criminal prohibition of any action, such as dismissal from a job or harassment, being taken against them if they report or testify. So in light of these realities, and keeping in mind that police has a very noble role to defend law and order, to protect people, and to safeguard human rights. So we're pleased in that respect with our cooperation with the Bulgarian authorities and civil society organizations, which enabled the translation of our manual on policing hate crime against LGBTI persons, and this launch event. This manual builds on the standards of the Council of Europe, as well as on the work and expertise of the Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Unit in assisting member states with the implementation of effective policies, legislation, and practical measures to prevent, identify, investigate, and prosecute hate crime against LGBTI persons, and protecting the victims. Now, up to now, trainings have been carried out in more than a dozen countries and involved hundreds of law enforcement officials. There have been very fruitful cooperation projects with police academies, which help to multiply the effects and mainstream the training. And we expect to see the effect of these efforts in the coming years. And we also hope that some similar dynamic will develop in Bulgaria. The manual is a practical tool and is above all victim-focused, because it's essential for police to put themselves somehow in the shoes of the victims, to understand how emotionally and physically, psychologically they are affected by the hate crimes, in order to really be able to investigate properly and understand the situation. But also to build confidence, because confidence is something that is crucial in relationship between police and victims, also between courts and victims. And we all know that confidence in the justice system in Bulgaria is something, also an area for improvement. And that confidence with police should be built through their everyday behavior. So this manual is really not so much about procedures, about legal aspects. It's really about their behavior and their understanding as human beings. I would like to thank our partners, of course, Действие, the NGO who is hosting this event, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Interior, especially Inspector Penka Stoyanova, and the Police Academy for their commitment to taking decisive steps to address the challenge of policing soldier-related hate crime. I assure that the Council of Europe remains ready to assist you directly with the implementation of the future trainings and with any other policy or capacity building initiatives related to LGBTI rights. Do not hesitate to ask for our help in writing or orally, or to address us and contact us with any questions or concerns. This event is the start of hopefully long and fruitful partnership. It is also a fantastic way to celebrate the Human Rights Day today. Congratulations for this important step and best wishes for the future work. Thank you very much.
Благодаря много, Ирена. Благодаря за всички аспекти, които засегна.
Thank you, Irena. Thank you for addressing all these aspects and especially for the opportunity to have this manual translated into Bulgarian.
Който в момента...
It can be used by law enforcement officials, authorities. It's already uploaded online and we are expecting the printed version very soon. It will be sent out to the Police Academy and the regional directorates in Bulgaria, and it can be used by law enforcement officials. Now I'd like to give the floor to a representative of the Ministry of Interior, Inspector Penka Stoyanova. She represents Public Order Police Department of the Bulgarian Police. Please have the floor. I'm not sure, can you hear me?
Здравейте, мисля, че вече се чуваме.
I think
Добър ден на всички, радваме се, че участваме. Тук в стаята с мен са още двама колеги, които са от отдел методическо ръководство и разследване на дейността по разследване. Това, което искам да кажа към всички днешни участници в срещата, че Министерство на вътрешните работи, също както Министерство на външните работи, подкрепя тази инициатива, като ние имаме така една дългогодишна история, едно сътрудничество назад във времето. Радвам се, че миналата година успяхме да реализираме няколко обучения, през тази година продължихме. За съжаление, пак отново COVID ни спря, но се надявам, че ще продължим. Венета си спомня в началото колко плахи бяха първите колеги, които участваха в първите обучения и каква съпротива имаше въобще да се включат, докато, да кажем, на четвъртото, вечето, шестото, вече нещата толкова се бяха разчупили, че имаше повече желаящи от това, което трябваше да организираме. И си спомняш дори на един семинар в Велинград, където трябваше да бъдат 20 човека, в един момент се появиха повече от 42. Така че интересът на колегите към темата е доста голям. Това има, така да се каже, своята предистория, защото за съжаление, през последните години престъпленията срещу ЛГБТ зачестиха. Няма какво да се лъжем, доста често те стават жертва на различни престъпления, като започнем от най-често казано хулигански прояви, обиди, грабежи спрямо тях, нанасене на телесни повреди, а някои, за съжаление, загубиха и живота. Това, което е важно и бих искала да акцентирам, не беше споменато и от госпожа Дидикова, че всеки един сигнал и всяко едно престъпление, което бъде извършено спрямо лице от тази общност, трябва да се докладва. Нека да не се срамуваме, нека да не прикриваме, защото не свеждайки тази информация до органите на полицията, които сме ние, няма как да реагираме
these crimes to the police has no way to react appropriately, because there may be groups of people who systematically commit this type of crime. They could be targeting LGBTI persons, and the sooner we have the relevant information, the sooner we can react and take the necessary measures to stop this kind of violence, these crimes against LGBT people. How are we planning to use this manual? First of all, this is a tool with very detailed explanations and descriptions of types of work with the LGBT community, but it also contains actual cases and examples. They can be used to both learn some good practices and learn some lessons what not to do concerning reactions to such signals or the reactions of separate police officers. I hope that if once we have the printed version and send it out to our colleagues across Bulgaria, we'll be able to start a more effective type of training. First of all, we plan to include not just public order police officers, but also all kinds of investigating officers across the country. So the colleagues from the methodical department of the police will prove very useful to us in this initiative. They're here with me, but you cannot see them now. I'd like to say that our support is absolutely evident. As you know, we are together marching with you on the Sofia Pride. And some of our colleagues even joke that it's also a police pride, because there are as many police officers as there are actual participants. I hope that in the future there won't be a need for that many police officers for the Sofia Pride, because it would be safer. So, not to go on indefinitely, that's all from us. Have a nice day. Thank you very much, Penka. A bit later today, we'll be able to share a bit more about the trainings that have taken place so far. Thank you very much for your expressed readiness on behalf of the Ministry of Interior to work continuously and systematically against hate crime against LGBTI people. And I'd like to thank you for your cooperation so far, because thanks to the cooperation of the Ministry of Interior, we have been able to hold the trainings in the past. I believe that all of us would be happy if the next Sofia Pride won't need that huge a police presence. It's true that the number of police officers courting Sofia Pride really is enormous, and for some people maybe even shocking. Now, next on the agenda is the issues at stake. Talk about problems as seen from the victim perspective, shared by an expert in human rights protection. And here to share this perspective is Denisa Lubanova, attorney at law. Hi. Thank you for inviting me to this event. Thank you. I'd like to thank the Council of Europe for the cooperation with the DESTI Association and our partners from the Ministries of Interior and the Foreign Affairs and the Police Academy, obviously. I personally was present at the first training in 2019 with the Bulgarian Ministry of Interior. It was a pilot training for us with such a large number of investigating officers from all regional directorates of the ministry. And as Ms. Stoyanova said, for me, It was indeed shocking at the beginning, but as time went by, we saw that investigating officers really did want to join these trainings and gain relevant knowledge. I'd like to share a brief presentation with you. Now I'm sharing my screen. What I want to do with this presentation is to show, from the perspective of LGBTI persons in Bulgaria, what they encounter, and in particular, hate crime, and how hate crime affects LGBTI people. Can you see? Yes, okay. Practical issues the police is facing. Some of them concern the fact that discrimination-motivated crime are not regulated in Bulgarian legislation. They're not a part in any way of the criminal code. There is no data about these crimes because they're not a part of the criminal code. There is no data in the National Statistical Institute either, and we have an underreporting by victims of LGBTI community. And the lack of data, one of the reasons for the lack of data is the secondary discrimination by law enforcement authorities. We have a case in our practice where a person went to register their complaint and was refused by the police. We have intervened on behalf of victims to get registration number and have their complaints lodged. There are various motivations for such refusals, from believing there is not enough evidence that such a crime took place, and to situations where the persons had a relationship, so there could not be a crime. We also have cases of secondary discrimination during the interview with the complainant. During such interviews and talking with victims of crime, law enforcement authorities must respect the LGBT person's dignity. Another reason for the underreporting is the multiple interviews hate crime victims are forced to undergo. Multiple successive interviews where they are forced to explain the same thing over and over again and prove that each separate stage of the crime actually happened. Another practical issue we have been facing in our work defending LGBT persons who were targeted is that the investigation isn't focused on the crime, but instead, and here I'd like to give you an actual example from our practice. About 6 months ago, a 21-meter flag of key building in Sofia was set on fire. During the investigation, the motivation of the crime was not taken into account. This motivation was obvious. It was intended to threaten the LGBTI community in Bulgaria. Instead, the investigation was focused on how much the crime was worth. The flag was worth. We all realize that this is obviously necessary and important, but the motivation of the persons, the perpetrators who set the flag on fire was not taken into account at all. And last but not least, I'd like to mention the rare cases where that go to go to court where the crime is qualified as a hate crime. I can give you a few examples here. One is a 2018 assault on Gala Petkova. She suffered physical injuries. The prosecution has not progressed. It was stopped because no perpetrator could be found. But what we need to point out here is that while she was assaulted, her assaulter used a slur against her, which I'm not going to repeat, but it clearly identified Gala as a person belonging to the LGBTI community, and it was followed by a threat, "Don't ever let me see you here again." Then she was hit in the face several times and lost several of her teeth. This incident was not qualified, and the motivation, which was the victim's sexual orientation, was not taken into account. Another example, which I think Ms. Penka Stoyanova mentioned, is the murder of Mikhail Stoyanov in 2008 in the Borisova Gradina Park in Sofia. Both in the preliminary and court investigation, the perpetrators repeatedly said that they were clearing the park off from gay people. The charge was in hooliganism. Later, the court rejected this charge, and it clearly said that this is not a hooliganism case. This is a homophobia-motivated crime, but because there is no relevant legislation, and the legislation does not include a heavier sentencing for this type of crime, such sentencing could not be obtained. So their sentencing was actually reduced. I'd like to point out a few opportunities to possibly solve these issues. Of course, these opportunities are a matter both of legislation and cooperation between organizations, Council of Europe, and Bulgarian authorities. But I'd like to summarize these opportunities. First of all, I'd like to mention the Directive for the Rights of Victims of the European Parliament and the Council of 2012. Unfortunately, this directive does not oblige member states to criminalize hate crimes based on sexual orientation and gender identity, but leaves this to the exclusive competence of national legislation. However, the directive does introduce specific measures concerning hate crimes and also standards for police procedures, obligations for officials to avoid discrimination while processing complaints on hate crime, enforces full respect of the dignity of the persons making the complaints, and obliges the authorities to the directive also provides for close cooperation concerning policies, information campaigns, and raising awareness of officials, as well as an obligation for member states to train lawyers, police officials, prosecution service officials, etc. Member states are also expected to ensure that the victim does have access to justice. I have a personal view here that LGBTI people would have access to justice if they are not, if their claims are not rejected just on the basis that there is no relevant legislation in Bulgaria. In this respect, I have compiled a few recommendations which I can give you on my behalf and on behalf of LGBT organizations in Bulgaria, namely better communication between the police and prosecution service in Bulgaria and LGBT organizations in Bulgaria, more trainings of police officials, and in particular investigating officers, the people who register complaints, establishing contact points in various towns. I'd like to mention something here as an aside. This is something that came up during the first training organized by LGBT Association Действие in the participating policemen shared with us, with Действие, that they need contact points and contact persons in the various towns and cities that would be responsible for hate crime. These officers should be trained to work with LGBTI persons. They should have the necessary sensitivity and obviously respect the dignity and needs of the person in question. And the continuous trainings over the years would create forge of a bond of trust between the police and the community, which would in turn lead to higher level of reporting of this type of crime and better prevention across Bulgaria. Obviously, the great impediment of all of us that are gathered here today in our work, investigation work, is to introduce a separate qualification in the criminal code for gender identity and sexual orientation. With this short presentation, I'd like to thank you for your attention. If you need more information, I'm available to send anything you may need in person or through Association Действие.
Thank you, Denny, and thank you for this exhaustive report on practical problems and the plan you offered of possible solutions. The last thing you mentioned, namely establishing contact points, is something which I too, in my practice with work with victims and investigative officers, think that could be very useful, and I think it would help a lot with reporting such crimes and investigating them. I would just like to add that during one of our trainings, we had a guest speaker from the Ministry of Interior of Serbia, a policewoman, who was actually appointed precisely in such a position. Actually, her position was called something like community police officer.
Основната ти работа всъщност е с цел превенция.
Her main duty was prevention and communication with the community so that reporting would be encouraged and investigative authorities would be supported in their work. Now, what we could do is we could have some time. We already mentioned trainings in Bulgaria during the last 2 years, and as we mentioned, they happened thanks to our cooperation with the Ministry of Interior and also our cooperation with the Police Academy. So in this context, I would like to give the floor to Professor Timchev, who is the rector of the Police Academy, and Professor Yordanov. Both of them joined the trainings we organized over the last 2 years.
Добър ден, чувате ли ни? Добре. Давам думата на ректора на академията, професор Тимчев, след което аз ще кажа няколко думи.
I'll give the floor to the rector of the academy, Professor Timchev, and then I'll say a few words. Hello, everyone. I would first like to congratulate the team who worked on the manual. I hope they received support from our academy. Nowadays, everyone is trying to make a profit from everything, so it's not easy compiling a manual like this. I do have my recommendations, but it is well structured and deals with an important topic. The colleague mentioned that police officers have a noble goal, which is protecting human rights, and that is important, but is not the only thing. It's protecting and guaranteeing human rights. I think every police officer, when they go to work in the morning, all their duties that have to do with public order should be paramount. So protecting human rights is truly important. And trainings are very important for our academy. I had the opportunity to attend such a training in Velingrad. We did have some discussions, but I think they were useful. We had heads of regional departments, heads of departments, and everything went smoothly. Of course, there were differences in opinion, but I think those are secondary issues. I hope that in the future we will pay more and more attention to these problems. I'm not going to be a rector forever. Professor Yordanov is probably going to be the next rector. So that's why he's here, because he represents the future, because right now he's sitting on the rector's chair. I'm hoping he'll at least take me as a deputy, and I advised him to change the chair because it's not very comfortable. Okay, that was a joke. But the advice I have on this manual is first the title. I don't think it should be called Manual on Police Actions. I think it should be Counteraction to Hate Crimes, because tactically in the manual, there is also the legislation, so this is about counteraction, but that's an advice for the future. If in the future there's a next edition, you might want to use our expertise. We have Professor Yordanov here, who's the future rector, and I'm sure he'll always be here to support any future initiatives. I would like to use the opportunity to wish good health to all of us. I think I did have the COVID. I was sick for a few days on antibiotics. I had a fever. So good health is truly the most important thing. God protect us. So if I have any issues, if I have any questions, I would turn to you. So I think we should use each other's expertise and hopefully stay safe and stay healthy. If you have any questions regarding education or you want to do a master's or a PhD, the Police Academy is very open. And this will remain the case when I'm not the rector. As you know, we're #1 in Bulgaria in national security. We have wonderful PhD students. We have young people like Professor Yordanov. So the Academy is very serious about tackling these issues and always ready to support initiatives. I don't see Professor Yordanova here. There she is. So we're very open to all sorts of trainings and practical initiatives. So if you have any questions, we're here to help. Professor Yordanov has more to say because he took part in more trainings. Also, I would like to say that the trainings were organized on a very high level, and we're very happy to be able to be part of this very important process. We're glad to be part of this process, but in other places, because we were accused of our police being homophobic, I think our police is actually one of the good examples. I've been to trainings in various countries where the police don't make any compromise. I've been to the US, Germany, Switzerland. Everything is very rigid and strict, whereas we're more flexible and try to protect the rights of everyone. And I hope our minister doesn't hear us, but I would say we're even too soft. Once again, stay safe, stay healthy. I hope we'll have more occasions to see each other and meet. I hope I'll be able to attend more trainings and continue our cooperation. Thank you and all the best. Thank you, Professor. I like it when you call me Professor. Do we have time for me to say a few words too? First, I would like to thank you for your invitation to take part in this online meeting. And thank you for the invitation to be part of the trainings over the last year. My name is Milurat Yordanov, and I'm a professor at the Police Academy. I would first like to say that the topic of human rights protection, and particularly the counteraction of hate crimes, is not a new topic. It is something we have been teaching at the Police Academy. In the first year, we teach human rights protection, and then in the second year, the human rights aspects of different crimes. A few years ago, we began an anti-discrimination protection course in the MA, which also deals with different forms of hate crimes and the necessary actions of police authorities. I would also like to congratulate our colleagues at the Council of Europe. I see people who we've already cooperated with. So this is nothing new for the police academy, but it does not mean that we should not improve and conduct more specialized trainings, such as the ones over the last year. Also, our rector played an important role in improving and organizing better cooperation with the LGBT Association. And I'm very glad that we were able to organize several trainings, although there was this pandemic. I took part in the trainings in July, which were 2 trainings of 2 days each. The target group were investigative officers, over 40 people. Perhaps some of them are here with us. I never doubted the professionalism and motivation of my colleagues, but it's a sensitive topic and it needs to be approached carefully. And we need to work with police officers to help them understand the importance of these crimes. But I think we conducted 2 trainings on a very high level, thanks to Maria. I allow myself to call her Maria by first name because I feel we've become friends over the course of these trainings with Vanetta and Denitsa and Maria. So I'm very glad that the situation in Bulgaria has allowed us, after the relaxing of COVID measures, to organize these trainings. Of course, when we talked to our colleagues from the LGBT Association, we have ideas to continue this cooperation and have trainings at the Police Academy, because this is a very important topic for people studying at the Academy and also for colleagues who are taking additional courses. So I am hoping for their cooperation and the cooperation of the Ministry of Interior and the colleague Marieta Angusheva, who has been very active in cooperation with the LGBT Действия Association. So I'm hoping we'll organize more trainings and build on what we've done so far. Regarding the manual, I had the opportunity to see it back in July. It was still a draft, still being translated. We used it in our trainings and stuck more or less to what is in the manual. And I think in the future it will be a very useful tool which we'll be able to use in the education of our students and acting police officers at the Police Academy. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I would like to congratulate you once again for being here, and I hope to be able to continue our cooperation.
Благодаря и на вас, и на професор Тимчев за това изключение.
Thank you, Milorad, and thank you, Professor Timchev, for this very fruitful cooperation with the Academy. It turns out, as we heard, that the manual is already in use before it was published in Bulgaria. And we have Maria Marinova-Kolai, expert on anti-discrimination and trainer, who led all the 6 trainings so far.
Особено ми е драго да взема и аз думата и даже ще си позволя да започна като госпожа Дидикова, че въпреки многото години зад гърба си, това е първото ми събитие и първите ми обучения в България по тази тема и самия факт, че в последните 18 месеца ние успяхме да ги организираме и да доведем нещата до етап, в който имаме много добро сътрудничество на правителството, на обучителните институции, на професионалните общности, ме кара да се чувствам особено горд, че участвам в този процес. Моята задача днес е накратко да ви разкажа какво всъщност се случи по време на тези обучения и аз ще си позволя да споделя с вас една много кратка презентация, която презентация ще ни преведе през тези последни 18 месеца. Като аз избрах да започна своята презентация с снимката от първото обучение в Велинград. Което обучение в Велинград, освен че беше пилотно, беше и едно много позитивно преживяване, защото събра на едно място професионални общности, активисти и хора, които при равни други условия до този момент не бяха имали възможност за такава, както ректор спомена, открита дискусия и споделяне на мнение. Моята презентация е на английски език, във връзка с всички колеги, които се интересуват от процесите, така че ще си позволя да продължа на английски след това. The trainings that have been organized in Bulgaria in the last 18 months, I call them a collection of milestones because everything that has been achieved is unique in itself. We've been working together for 18 months since May or June 2019, but in reality, this very first training, the pilot training in Velingrat, was organized within less than a month. And you can all imagine what it is to make a public administration and a non-governmental organization to cooperate, go through all the administrative procedures, and then in the end, as the representative of Ministry of Interior said, Mrs. Stoyanova, and instead of 20, we had more than 50 participants enrolled. So for 18 months, we did more than 6 trainings with more than 100 law enforcement officers, and these trainings were interconnected. So we started with this big event where we gathered people for the first time. And the main aim of this first training was to introduce the concept of hate crimes, the way it's dealt with on a European level, and also to introduce the Bulgarian professional community in the field of law enforcement with peer associations and organizations from across Europe. And within the trainings that we have organized, there were participants representing the European LGBT Police Association, the Pink and Blue Police Network from the Netherlands, the Gay Police Organization from Sweden, the Department of Counter-Racist Violence from Thessaloniki, Greece, and the representative of the Ministry of Interior of Republic of Serbia. So that event, bringing all these people together and bringing this international dimension was the opening gate for all of us and for what followed later on, which led us to where we are today, being able to introduce you to the Bulgarian translation of the Council of Europe SOGI Unit Manual on Policing Hate Crimes against LGBTI persons. That wouldn't be possible, of course, without the cooperation with the Police Academy, and I am personally grateful for the support of the rector and the professors. They were participants, they were also co-trainers, and they brought in the specific expertise, the police perspective into the training, which made the whole process really, really valuable for everybody present. Now, the manual as such is what we based the trainings on, and I will briefly go through the manual for the people that haven't had the chance to go through it. The manual is organized in several chapters, but it pays specific attention to the issue of stereotypes and discrimination as the lead into the topic and what helps break ice, barriers, and open a frank discussion. It also is a process that if we manage to overcome our stereotypes and prejudices and talk in a discrimination-free manner, we will immediately address the issue of underreporting, because as previous speakers before me mentioned, one of the issues to do with underreporting goes in line with the lack of trust and the way people are fear they will be treated, and the preparation also of the law enforcement to address certain vulnerable groups. So the manual also offers a chapter on investigating hate crimes with a victim-centered approach, which makes it extremely useful for the current setting because it changes the perspective and it gives the investigating police officers the chance to see it through a different lens and to think a bit about the empathy, the emotional intelligence, and the support that needs to be provided to the victims, first and foremost, and then to proceed with the administrative procedures that are part of the case being filed. The manual also addresses the cooperation with the civil society organizations as contact points, as trusted sources for the community, and the current event being hosted by a civil society organization and in cooperation with the Council of Europe and the Ministries of Interior and Foreign Affairs is an example of itself of how this can practically happen. The manual also has a chapter that addresses the barriers in the follow-up, for example, in the case of Bulgaria, and what Denita mentioned just before me is the need to address the legislative framework and the way hate crimes against LGBTI persons are addressed. So there is part of this challenge being dealt with inside the manual. But what makes the manual really different and what makes it beneficial for the process is also that it is built up across this notion of experiential learning and non-formal education. And it provides an opportunity for people to think first and foremost. Our participants were provided with the opportunity to see and experience and meet LGBTI activists, ordinary people. They were presented with case studies that are part of the Council of Europe portfolio. So that combination of tools and experiences makes the training different from the formal type of lecturing. The experiential learning breaks barrier and provides food for thought. And what our trainings, especially the last one, brought additional value added for the process is that we managed within the framework to organize the first ever living library with LGBTI persons and investigative police officers. And it was an eye-opening process for both sides because each side has its own prejudices, and having the chance to talk and meet and ask and answer questions was a process that provided not only food for thought, but it opened doors. What I meant is that based on the trainings, and as Mrs. Stoyanova mentioned earlier, the more we did, and at the end of the sixth one, the training that Murat mentioned in July this year, was a moment in which everybody in the room was at the level of being able to freely address the variety of gender identities, the variety of prejudicial attitudes, and also to challenge his or her own perceptions. During the Living Library, which was hosted by Действие, but it was organized in cooperation with other LGBT organizations, including Abilities and Glass Foundation. And here it is important for me, it's extremely important to mention that this process is a joint effort by the whole community. So people, activists from different NGOs attending this library gave us feedback at the end of the session, their own feeling of what they call it normality of the police officers, and vice versa. The police officers themselves had also insights about the normality of the other side. And just to be a bit more specific, at the end of the living library, one of the participants was talking about same-sex couples and children being raised in such couples, and her idea about that. And she said that to a certain degree she was against people living in same-sex marriages and having same-sex couple partners raising children. But at the end of the training, if you allow me to paraphrase her words, she said, having met Veneta, her daughter, and having talked to them for 3 consecutive days, I can see that there is nothing wrong, and I am ready to meet more people, hear more stories, and would like to know how I can support those people. So this highlight is a breakthrough for both sides. And a breakthrough on the other side is another example that I will give you. As a result of the trainings that we organized, there was a situation in the northeastern part of Bulgaria where some LGBTI people wanted to report a crime. They approached the police, wanted to file a complaint. They were sent back, but having called Veneta and then she calling the officers that we trained, I'm already talking about this network that is created and the cooperation that is about to flourish. From now on, they were invited again to the police, their file was taken, and they received the needed attention. So we are right now at the stage in which the civil society organizations, the activists on the grassroots level have contacts and a network of prepared professionals in the law enforcement who are capable of addressing adequately complaints. These are the first steps. Of course, much more can be and will be done, but I would like to see it as a perspective which will further develop. These are a couple of images from the trainings and this non-formal methodology, this experiential learning, the discussion-based process, and the opportunity for people to interact and exchange experiences. And finally, my last point would be about the next steps and what is, of course, ahead of us. For sure, the manual is available right now in Bulgarian. We have already had meetings with the academy and Professor Timchev. Действие is ready to provide the library of the academy with copies of the manual. Copies of the manual will also be sent to the Ministry of Interior to be further distributed to the participants of the trainings, but not only, also to the regional departments. We also hope that the cooperation with the Police Academy will continue. I am glad to see here that apart from Milorad Yurdanov, we also have other colleagues from the academy, professors from the academy that can and hopefully will support the process. Действие and I myself as trainer in anti-discrimination, we are more than willing and hopeful to continue this cooperation and further discuss the opportunities to introduce parts of the manual into existing courses, but also to prepare specialized courses based on the manual for different functions within the law enforcement system. We have already also created a network, as I mentioned, of law enforcement officers that have been trained, who will be multipliers, hopefully when COVID is over or where the situation allows us to continue meeting people. And they are planning local events. I can give you the example of the trainees from the Sliven and Jambu regional directorates, who during the training in July expressed willingness to host a joint event, introduce the manual and also the topic to their colleagues from Sliven and Jambu police departments. And last but not least, I personally would like the manual and this educational process to continue and address a couple of issues. My last point would be about the support for public events and the first point of contact. A couple of months ago in Plovdiv, there was a situation, an event in which teenagers were harassing and abusing peers, mostly homophobic harassment. And subsequently, there was an event supported and organized by the LGBT community of Plovdiv, but also by this network of LGBTI NGOs, including Действие, Glass, Abilities, maybe others that I'm just missing right now, but I'm sure that everybody was there. So that event was, there was a situation during that event that required specific attention from the local law enforcement to preserve the public security, so we can do more to better prepare and help professionals deliver their duties. And also we can invest more into training the first point of contact, those policemen that are welcoming citizens into the police departments when they enter to file a complaint. So except for the investigation into law enforcement, there are other areas where we can further continue, and I'm confident that the existing cooperation between the Council of Europe, the Ministry of Interior, with the support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the civil society organizations, the network of civil society organizations, will lead us into more events and to more situations like this workshop today, to present not only the tools, but also the outcomes. I remain confident that there is a bright future in front of us. I don't wear pink glasses. I have seen these people. I have been through all 6 trainings. And I am confident that we are about to have many more things to be proud of in the coming future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Благодаря много, Мария.
Thank you very much, Maria. Especially for the fact that all of us managed to receive to get not just more information, but to get a sense of how these trainings went so far, and get a feeling of what is to come in the future, what remains to be done. It's a lot. To me personally, this kind of work, this event that we're holding now, the opportunity to be a part of the organizing these trainings and to participate in this event as an LGBT person and parent and as representative of an LGBT organization, to me emotionally is very important, and it fills me with hope and with the sense that it's not just us in the non-government organizations and the LGBTI people, but everyone is willing to and is making effort to contribute to bring about equality between all people, despite the differences between them and discrimination they face. With each step of this process, my confidence grows that this is possible here and now. We're almost at the close, and I would like to mention here, and I think this goes for all of us, that I'm looking forward and I'm filled with anticipation towards cooperation and support from the authorities, forward to communication, changes in legislation and existing support frameworks. I'm looking forward to continuing these trainings, both of acting policemen and cadets in the police academy. I hope we will continue to build on this cooperation between police officers and trainers. And I'm looking forward to continuing these efforts of LGBT organizations, not just Действие, but also the Glass and Bilitis foundations to work with the community, to create opportunities and enable the public to be better informed, know more about LGBTI issues, so that LGBTI persons can find support and report more of these crimes, which in turn will lead to better prevention. And this is where we reach the end of our event. Obviously, looking forward to a potential new one, hopefully this time live. And I hope we will be able to incorporate the session we couldn't do today